Hilchos Tumas Meis Perek Esrim, the laws of corpse impurity, chapter 20. We're 20 chapters in. This is a new point in this set of laws. Till now, the last 7 chapters or so, we've been talking about oihel, how tumah will spread under a covering from the corpse or the corpse flesh to anything that's under it. Today we turn to a little more positive side of the oihel concept, which is what's called the matzilin. Matzilin mean the savers. There are things or entities or ways that you could be under the same roof as a dead body, and yet you will be saved from the dead body's power. The corpse tumah will not spread to these things within the oihel. And that's going to be the topic starting today for the next couple of days, of those things that are matzilin, that are savers in a tent with a corpse. Says the Rambam halacha aleph shleisha dvarim matzilin ba'oihel hameis. There are 3 things, 3 basic things that save impurity from spreading within the tent of a corpse. Number 1, tzamid pasil. Tzamid pasil is the word used in the Torah to describe a tight covering. As we're going to see, this law basically means that if you have a big container and you have stuff in it and you seal the container very tightly, the oihel tumah doesn't spread into the container. So it saves from the oihel. Second thing, the oilin, a tent itself. If you have a tent within a tent, or a tent within a room, the inner room also saves the tumah from spreading. We'll soon see exactly how. Number 3, ubluin, absorption, swallowing. One thing inside another, many times will be saved from oil. Now, the Rambam first differentiates between the first 2 and the third. Habluyin matzilin al hatohirim shelo yistamu. Swallowed entities save both ways. That means, if you've swallowed something pure, and now you're in a room with a corpse, the corpse tumah will not spread to what's inside you. But also, umaynin hatuma shalaitetzeu satame. They will stop impurity from going outward and spreading. So if an animal swallowed corpse flesh, we'll see in a minute, and it walks into a room, the fact that it's swallowed will not allow it to spread into the room. Avol tzamid pasil v'ayalin, but the first 2, the tight covering and the tent, matzilan al hatohirim shala yistamu, yes, they do save things inside them which are pure from becoming impure from the corpse outside of them. However, the einon meinin esatuma shalaitetzeu satame esacherim. They will not stop impurity from leaving them. So if you have this tight closed container and there's corpse flesh in it, it will escape to the rest of the room, as the Rambam immediately demonstrates. Ketzad, what's an example of this? Let's visualize it. Bayis tameh sheyesh by kli mukaf tzamid pasil. You have a home which is impure. Why is it impure? Because there's a corpse in it. Okay, so the home is impure. And inside this home, in the same room, there's a utensil which is surrounded by a very tight covering, really tightly closed. Kol shebasei chakli tahirim. Whatever is in the utensil is blocked, it's protected, and it's going to be pure. Truth is, we're going to see that that's only biblically, rabbinically speaking, it only protects food, drink, and pottery utensils. Other than that, if it's metal, the tumah will spread inside. But definitely, biblically, everything is saved. Same thing if there was an oihel, if there was a covering inside the home. Any utensils that are inside this tent are pure. Now obviously, we're talking about a case where the tent itself is not made of a material that's susceptible to impurity. Because if it is, then the oil itself becomes impure, and by virtue of that, it passes the tumah into the kelim that are inside it. But if it doesn't mikabel tumah, if it's not susceptible to impurity, it will save anything inside it. Of course, this picture is inaccurate. It has to be closed, not open. If it's open, then it's all in the same room. So this is how the container and the tent save things from the outside from influencing the inside. Avalim haya kezayas min hameis nosun bekelim. But if it was the opposite, here, the corpse flesh is now inside the utensil. You have a container, and there's a kezayas of corpse in the utensil, umukaf alav b'tzamid pasil, even if it's surrounded by a tight covering, v'yichnisa labayis, and you bring it into a home, habayis tameh, the whole home becomes impure. It spreads outward. V'chein oyhel, b'soich oyhel. Same thing if you have a tent within a tent. Ukezayis min hameis ba'oyel apnimi. and there's an olive-sized portion of the corpse in the inner tent, kol hakelim sheba'oyel achitzain tmeim, any utensils in the outer tent become impure. Now right here the Ravid comments that this also is only true if the oil is susceptible to impurity. But if the oil is not susceptible to impurity, actually it will block the flesh from exiting unless there's no other way that it could leave except for going through the home. And this is going to become a very significant point later in this chapter. Halacha beis, aval habluyin, but things that are swallowed save both ways. They save pure entities from becoming impure, and they will stop impure entities from spreading out of them and causing impurity. Ketzad, what's an example? Kelev she'achal b'sar hameis. You have a dog that ate some corpse flesh. Of course, you won't give the example of a person because we cannot consume corpse flesh, but a dog could. So a dog eats some corpse flesh, v'nichnas labayis, and it goes into a home. Inside the dog is corpse flesh. Doesn't matter. Habayis tahar. The home is completely pure. By the way, I should say that swallowed means in the stomach. The Rambam will soon define that. Just putting something in your mouth, even though it's covered, is not called swallowed. It has to be all the way down into the intestinal system. Bala tabas, if a dog were to swallow a ring, which is a pure entity, here's the ring inside of him, afilu adam shabala tabas, even a person who swallowed a ring by mistake, the nichnas la'oyel hameis, and he goes into a room with a dead body, afal pisha nitma tumas shiva, even though he himself becomes impure for 7 days because you're in the same room as a dead body, hatabas tahira, the ring inside of you is pure. What's the practical ramification of that? Commentaries say if the person will go to the mikveh and become pure, and then he'll throw up the ring will stay pure. Obviously, if he throws it up while he's still impure, the ring will become impure because it touched him. But the point is that if it stays in your system long enough, and then you throw it up once you're already pure, it'll stay pure. Anything that's swallowed inside a beast or an animal or a bird or a fish, matzilin will be saved, kol zman shehin chayin, so long as the animal or fish, the bird, is alive. But if the animal died with the corpse flesh or the utensil inside of it, it doesn't have the power of swallowing. Swallowing is only for a live animal or a live human. Halacha Gimel, we have to define life. You're saying as long as it's alive, it'll save what's swallowed in it. After it's dead, it won't. At what point does it become dead? If most of one of the main pipes in a bird was slaughtered, or most of two of them in the animal, which is a classic shchita, and even though they're still convulsing, at this point, they're like dead. They will not save any utensils that are swallowed in their systems. They also won't stop if they have any impure flesh inside of them. They won't stop them from going out and making the room outside of it impure. How long can corpse flesh stay inside them and keep on transmitting impurity after they die? We're saying that once an animal dies, if it has corpse flesh inside of it, the corpse flesh will spread. So what if it ate corpse flesh last week and then it died after 7 days? It's still going to communicate impurity? No. Says the Rambam, we go after the time of digestion. Bekelev, for a dog, shloisha yamim me'es leis. 3 periods of 24 hours, 72 hours. From when a dog eats corpse flesh, the corpse flesh will communicate impurity if the dog dies within 72 hours. Other animals or beasts or birds or fish, they have 24 hours, one 24-hour period. Otherwise, if they die after that, the meat inside them no longer makes things impure. When do we say this? If the corpse flesh remained in their intestines. Let's say tragically, a wolf swallowed a baby and lets it out through the backside. The system will not let it out of itself unless the flesh has already been digested. Therefore, habasar tahar, the flesh of this baby is actually pure. It doesn't transmit any impurity. While the bones, however, still retain impurity because they could be let out of the system even before being digested. Now, only over here that Rambam makes a difference between bones and flesh, which implies that if it stays in the system, inside their stomach, no difference between the bones and the rest of the flesh. Until digestion time, it's impure. After digestion time, it's pure. Halacha hey, ein abluyin nitzalin ella bebeten nefesh hachaya, k'mesha b'yarnu. The whole idea of absorbed substances is only if it's in the stomach of a living being, as we just explained, k'mesha b'yarnu. Aval habluyin begufa kelim v'ha'avanim, but if something is absorbed into a utensil or into a stone, eina nitzalin, they're not saved. Ketzad, what's an example of this? Koish shenivla abai hatzinar shel matechas. Koish was a spindle, the piece of wood that you use litvot for spinning thread. At the bottom of the spindle, typically was this, or here it's the top, was this tzinoida, it's called, a metal small piece. Now, that metal small piece, with enough use, could fall into the spindle. It comes out of the wood, but it can, with enough wear and tear, it's absorbed inside of it. Umalmad shenivla by hadarvan, or malmad was this piece that they would use, according to most opinions, to clean off the plow. The plow, machresha. There was a plow that would, go into the earth, and it would get sometimes earth collect on it. You have to clean it off every once in a while. So this malmad was a wooden handle, and it had at the edge of it a metal piece called a darvan. And the darvan slipped into the handle. Malmad shenivla by hadarvan. Uleveina shahisa tabas muvlas b'seicha, or a brick in which there was a ring swallowed in it. When you were making the mud for the clay, a ring fell inside it and it got swallowed into the brick. So now this spindle with the metal inside of it, or this malma with the metal inside of it, or this brick with the ring inside of it, entered a room with a dead body, nitmu, they become impure. Even though the objects inside of them, you can't see them and they're covered. Because things that are swallowed into utensils cannot be saved unless they're wrapped like a regular container in a tight covering. So here the commentaries make a big issue. The Rabbi has probably one of the biggest comments in the entire Rambam here, and the other commentaries as well raise the issue that the Rambam himself seems to imply elsewhere that kelim do have some element of balua. They do have some element of absorption that does seem to work. But over here the Rambam says, no, it doesn't work. Something inside of a utensil is not considered to be absorbed. If you had a ring or a needle swallowed into the coating of an oven, we're going to see at length in the laws of utensils that these ovens that they used to make, they used to like insulate it with a layer of mud and clay to keep the warmth. Literally as an insulator, yeah. So when you were making this mixture, a needle fell inside of it or a ring fell inside of it. And something happened to make the oven impure, either because it came into the room as a corpse, or a sheretz, a dead rodent, fell into its airspace. Whatever utensils are swallowed up in this insulation, in the coating, still become impure. But if the oven itself was surrounded by a tight covering, since the oven in that case would be pure, also the utensils that are swallowed into the coating on top of it will be pure. Not because of the law of tzamid pasil, but because of being batal. Because they're nullified or subservient to the oven, they get the status of the oven. And if the oven is pure, they will also be pure. Same thing if you have a barrel that was surrounded by a tight covering, and there was a needle or a ring in the stopper, the covering of the barrel on its side. Here's somewhat of how it used to look. They had this barrel, and there was a stopper that used to put in a piece, and then around the stopper, you would put a layer of coating. Okay? Now this coating sometimes would enter the actual barrel and line the stopper from all sides. So let's say a needle or a ring got stuck over here, in the side. They're not called balua. They don't get saved. They're impure in the tent of a dead body. But if they were already lower in, over here, where it's opposite the open space, the mouth of the barrel, so then, if all it was is that you would see them, if you could stand in the barrel, you can see them, but they're not actually sticking out into the airspace of the barrel, then tahayden, they're still pure. But once they extend into the airspace of the barrel, tmein, they become impure. As we're going to explain, a clay utensil surrounded by a tight covering doesn't save other utensils in it, only other foods in it. But if under them, if this clay extended into the sides over here, and it was covering over here, this area, so that under the stuck needle or ring, there is even a tiny amount, a garlic peel. That's how thin it is, but it's covering it. Even though they're sunk into the airspace, into the airspace, and they're still pure. What about things which are absorbed into the floor of a home? They're under the floor. They are impure. They don't get saved. The floor of a tent in which a corpse is found is the same status as a tent all the way to the depths. Not so with the walls. Things in the walls have different laws, and by the way, things in a roof between two stories also have different laws. Ketzad, what does it mean? For example, hatuma babayis, you have a source of impurity in the home. There's a corpse on the floor. The kelim tmunim bekarka isay, and utensils are buried in its ground. Afilu tachas mea amma, even 100 cubits deep. Tmeim, they're all impure. Im yesh b'mekayman tefach al tefach, if where they're buried has its own hollow space of a tefach by a tefach, tohirin, they're actually pure. Shaharein tachas oyel echad, because they're under a separate oyel. Some say oyel acher, oyel echad. Point is the same. They're under their own oyel. What could that be compared to? You have two stories. Tuma is in the second story. Shabai is Torah. The first story is pure. It's two different things. So the first story on underground is also, if it has a tefach by a tefach, a separate oil. Same thing if you would divide the room with a board across its height. And there's impurity between the board and the ground. Anything above the board would be impure because the corpse on the bottom affects what's above it. Because a covering doesn't stop tuma from going up, as we explained. And right here is the big problem, because we said before that the Rabbi writes that it's only if it's an oil which is susceptible to impurity. If it's not susceptible to impurity, it should be chaytzitz. It's a very big question here in the Rambam. The Rabbi says it's a different reason. It's because derech hatuma latzes, tuma only goes outwards. So since this is the only way to go out, therefore it will penetrate through and make the kelim tameh, but not because of the essential law that oilim stop impurity. But either way, if it's here, if the corpse is under and the kelim are on top, it goes upwards. Whereas hoisa tuma l'mayla mina mechitza, if the source of impurity is above the mechitza, kelim shebena mechitza v'ha'aretz tahirim. Any utensil on the lower floor, so to speak, under the mechitza are pure. Sha'oil matzil, because the oil will save the pure stuff from becoming impure, going inwards. If the board is so low that there isn't a tefach of space under the ground, under the board to the ground, it's as if the utensils are buried into the floor and they would be impure. You have a sewage pipe that's running under the house. Wasn't as professional as today, but they used to have, in the middle of the home, a hole where they would pour dirty water and stuff. Typically had a cover, and then it would run to outside of the house. So here, the Rambam is talking about a case where the door, the opening in the house is closed. This pipe is going outwards. The space of the pipe is a handbreadth by a handbreadth. At the point where it exits the house, there's also an opening of a tefach at the entrance. If there's impurity inside the pipe, habayis tahar, it doesn't enter the home. It goes outwards. The home remains pure. If impurity is in the home, since the door is closed, the impurity will leave the home the natural way. It will not go through the sewage pipe. The pipe is pure. However, if the pipe had a tefach by a tefach, but the entrance or the exit to the outside is not a tefach by a tefach, so nothing can leave it. In terms of impurity, so if impurity is in the pipe, habayis tameh, the home will be impure because it won't escape through the other exit where there's not a tefach by a tefach. However, if tuma is in the home, what's in the pipe is still pure. Because tuma will not enter; it will only exit the house in the normal way. If neither it nor its exit has a tefach, And the truth is, as long as it doesn't have a tefach, even if its exit does, but the pipe itself doesn't have a tefach, tuma b'soicha, if tuma is inside of it, habayis tamei ki ilu hi b'soicha bayis. The whole house is impure as if it were in the home, because it's not a separate oil. Tuma b'bayis, masha b'soicha tamei. If tuma is in the home, it extends to the pipe. Because any utensils in the pipe will be like utensils buried in the ground. The karka habayis kamayu adat, and the law of the ground of the house is that it has the same status as the home. Halacha ches, shtei chaviyos, it's a very interesting halacha. You have two clay barrels. The kachatzi zayis b'kol achas. A half an olive-sized portion of flesh is in each utensil. Umukaflish tzamid pasil. Each barrel is wrapped very tightly. Umunachis b'sei chabayis, and they're in the home. A fascinating thing happens. Hein tohiris. Each barrel is pure. She'ein chatzi shir mitamed, because half the amount doesn't make them impure. The habayis tameh. But the house becomes impure. Shahadayesh babayis kazayis, because in the home there's a full olive-sized portion of flesh. Since ve'ein samid pasil latuma, the tight covering doesn't block the impurity from exiting. So you have half olive-sized portion leaving here, half olive-sized leaving here into the home. The home has a kazayis in it. Ve'enon mitamais machmas habayis, but the barrels themselves don't become impure from the house. Shahadayin mukafis tamid pasil, because each one is surrounded by a tight covering. So when the tuma leaves this one, it will not be able to enter that one. Remember that kli cheres can only become impure from its inside. So the power of this one will not enter here, nor will this one enter here. They'll both enter the home, but not each other. Niftecha achas mehen. Here, watch. The cover came off of one of them. One of them opened. Hiva habayis tmeyin v'chaverta tohira. So it will become impure, because now the half olive-sized portion coming out of here will enter here. So it and the home will be impure, but its friend will still remain pure, because the half olive size here cannot enter this one. Same thing if you have two rooms open into each other and into the main room. So it's actually three rooms. One inner room, one middle room, one outer room. You have a half an olive-sized portion in the inner room or the middle room, and a half an olive-sized portion here in the outer room. So since tuma goes outwards, the outer room becomes impure, because this one, the energy of this one spreads outwards. But the inner ones are pure, because the tuma doesn't go back inside. Same thing if you had in the two inner rooms. Half olive-sized portion here, half olive-sized portion here. Hapnimi toher. The inner one is pure, because the flesh doesn't go backwards, inwards. And the inner one, and also the outer one, which there's no meat inside of there anyways. But the tuma goes outwards, becomes impure. The guiding principle is, tuma always heads outwards, it never heads inwards. So wherever you can make the combination going forwards, will become impure. Backwards will not become impure.